I've had teams that were really deep. We had a lot of kids. We could run tempo offense. We could score a lot of points, have a lot of fun. And I've had other teams that were a little leaner, where we had less players and less depth, and we were playing, both ways and stuff like that. And so from a schematic perspective, it changes what you do. So you can't always, kind of try and ram that square peg in a round hole. You have to say what works for this team to achieve their potential. And so a lot of work goes in on the back end of saying, from a schematic perspective, what's going to help this team achieve their potential. From a human performance and training perspective, what's it going to look like? Do we need to do more or less conditioning, more or less speed training, more or less weightlifting? Like, do we have to practice more? Do we have to practice less? Like, you're taking into account all of those things. And ultimately, this is I think the biggest thing that allowed for like any amount of success I had as a coach was the promise I made the athletes was that I would never waste their time. And so we practiced shorter than maybe any team in the country, because I said, if you commit to putting everything you have into this 90-minute practice, you're done. You go home. It's it. And the amount of focus we had was increased because we weren't keeping them on the field for 3 hours, and we weren't, laboring in some of the ways that I think a lot of programs labor. And so I think it's interesting. Like, there were teams that, we said, we're never going to waste your time. And then they come to me saying, Coach, I think we need to work on this a little bit more. I think, I want to have a lunch with the offensive line to go through some film stuff. And when they started wanting to do extra, that's when I knew I had a team that was going to really rise to the occasion. And I think whenever, as coaches, I think a lot of times we try to almost mandate, like, you need to do extra, you need to do more on top of all the more and extra we're already doing. And when you can get a team to say, of their own will and accord, we want more, that's when you have a team that I think is gonna really be successful. And successful may not look like winning a state championship. It may look like achieving their potential. But I think to get that buy-in, it was promising, especially this generation, never going to waste your time. Because I value you as a person, and I value other interests you may have. And so in order for you to be a part of this team, I want you to be fully here when you're here, and then enjoy life when you're not.
I love the philosophy of we're gonna do less, but it's gonna be amazing, really good reps every time. Yes. We're fully focused. Less is more quality over quantity.
Correct. My wife's a graphic designer, and so I've learned a lot, just kind of life philosophy stuff from her. And she obviously, like, minimalism is kind of a word that gets thrown around the design community in terms of, like, not being overbearing with a logo or something like that. But really, the idea of less but better is something that, like, I really took to heart. And one of the pieces of advice I always give to coaches that are kind of starting out as offensive coordinators or something like that, I always say, install less than you think you need and rep it more than you think you need to. And I think that's just a good philosophy to have. Like, as coaches, we always want to do more. We're always going to have this desire to do more. And I had a really interesting conversation with Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator at North Carolina, and he said, I have my coach's playbook, which is about 1,000 pages, and my player's playbook, which is about 200 or 150 pages. And so, like, as coaches, we're always going to have a deep reservoir of stuff we like. But for that particular team, what do they need? And how can I deliver it in a way that works for them? So I love the idea of a coach's playbook versus a player's playbook. And if you can pare down and get the most meaningful stuff in there, I think that's when you're going to have a team that really gets it and is able to execute.
I remember in my high school days, we eventually added more, but for like the first 4 weeks, we'd run outside zone and inside zone, and that's it. Because the offensive line's got enough to think about, learning where to go, what to do, all your steps. And once you master that, then you can graduate on to the next level of stuff.
For sure.
I look back. I had such a good group of high school coaches, man. I think I had like a college level staff coaching me in high school. Did you have any other advice for young coaches, man, that I always will never forget what you said just now, and I've heard you say it before, that install less than you think and rep it more than you think. But is there anything else you would say to young coaches?
Man, I think there's a lot of pressure on young coaches to learn a lot fast. And I would just say, like, be patient with yourself, because what you want is not necessarily just to, like, stuff all this knowledge in your head so that you know everything. I think more than anything, you want that knowledge to get like into the deeper part of your brain where it becomes like second nature. And so like take the slow approach to learning the game. Take your time, because I think the coaches that feel like they have to master something in a couple weeks, those are the coaches that they don't really have answers and can't think creatively. They're trying to like basically memorize the answers to the test and regurgitate the answers to the test. And I think the best coaches are the ones that maintain the creativity and the problem-solving nature of coaching. And I always tell people, like, coaching is problem-solving for your athletes. Like, that's what it is. And so if you're having an issue, don't always go to the manual and say, all right, well, now that we installed Mike Leach's offense, like, what does Mike Leach do here? It's like, well, you may need to get creative with the particular player you have as a slot receiver. How are they going to make sure they get the timing down on this route? And trying to understand those things and problem solve for your athletes, I think is so crucial. So that's a big piece of advice I have, is like take the slow approach to learning the game, because the deeper that knowledge embeds in you, the more creative you can be, and the more you're able to see the game and solve problems for your athletes, instead of saying like, okay, they're in cover 3 and here's a cover 3 beater and this is always going to work. Like, theoretically on paper, yes, but like it may not work with the players you have. Like, you may not have the arm strength to get that throw to the field. And so there's things like that where you just have to think about, like, how can I make the game work for my players? Like, that's the goal of a coach. It's not the theory, it's the practice.